Excellent. I love it when things come together. All right. So welcome back. Once again, we truly appreciate everybody's time and effort in being a part of the programming training here today. This is session 2 of a 3-part session. My name is Tyler Nelson. I'm the National Training Manager for RTI. And with me is the incomparable, the unbelievable, the immaculate Mr. Vincent Bova, our Director of Dealer Experience and System Engineering. And he is, one of the coolest things about RTI is that as we've continued to grow, and I mentioned this yesterday, is that, we've taken on new roles, we've adjusted roles, we've brought new people on to help facilitate the growth patterns that are happening within RTI. And one of those is that, our system design team, our sales engineering team also offers a free system design for you for any of those projects that you may be working on. So Vincent, to, Clive out in EMEA, Luke out in APAC, in Australia, or Clive up in the UK and covering Europe, or two in the central, Vincent on the east in the US and all things. And then Nick Ariaza is on the West Coast. And, our free design service is one of those benefits, I guess you could say, to being an RTI dealer, and that we're going to help you make sure that the project's successful. And Vincent, do you want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I apologize.
Sometimes, RTI has a very broad product line with a lot of different accessories and add-on pieces, and some of your projects, whether they're residential or commercial, it can be a tough decision, like which processor should I use, from a simple question or up to, how can I do this or that? So we're here to help you design your systems. As far as the RTI side goes, we'll of course help you in areas where we're familiar with, but mostly RTI, on the RTI side, will help you pick out the right products and help you figure out, wiring specs, POE budgets and things like that. So take us up on that. It's very helpful. And I think it's a valuable service, and we're always here for you. Don't call tech support with that. Call the dealer experience directly. We have an email, dealerexperience@rticontrol.com. So just send us an email and we'll hook up with you and talk about your project in detail.
Absolutely. And, just to piggyback on that, as one of the things that is helpful for that team or any of the team members is to kind of have an idea of what you're looking to do or what the client's looking to do already. So you've had those conversations, you have an idea of the expectations, and you've started that project profile that we created yesterday for that client. And if you can bring all those things to our dealer, to our system sales engineers and the system design, it makes it much more of a fluid experience for you, and we can make sure that we're recommending the right product. So thank you, Vincent, on that.
Oh, you know what? One more thing, Tyler.
Yeah.
It's always good when you do call us, though, to have a really close to final idea on not only what you're using in the system, but what your client wants, how you intend to use devices. For example, what devices are being shared across more than one room, things like that. So really have a finalized idea of what's going on before you call us, because otherwise it's a waste for both of us. So kind of get a final idea. Thanks.
Yeah, no, we want to be as efficient as possible with your time. We know that's valuable. So what I want to do real quick is give a review of what we did yesterday, real brief, and then kind of our objectives for today. And then, of course, we'll get into the programming right away. So, and of course, as always, post your questions and answers in the Q&A section as we're going along, and we'll get those answered right away. I also did turn on the chat for everybody. So the program file that that we were putting together yesterday is on there. It looks like Alejandro was able to get it, which is great. And but like I said, please put those questions in the question and answer section, and we'll get you going. So real quick, a review of yesterday. We talked about the structure of building a project within Integration Designer 11, what that looks like in terms of building the project file and understanding what the client's needs are going to be, understanding what their expectations are, the products that you're going to be using, and how they'll work together and tie together and communicate. And creating that file on the computer that houses everything from the Integration Designer files to the profile, to the walkthroughs, to the wiring schematics, whatever else is needed for a successful installation. We talked about the software itself and the overall, all the different windows and options within it. We talked about how to begin a project and naming the file and how the naming nomenclature is a .apex to only be allowed to be open with Integration Designer 10 or above. And the fact that Integration Designer 9 files won't be able to be open in Integration Designer 11, but doesn't mean that you can't keep updating those projects or maintaining those projects that you have created in previous versions of Integration Designer. We just recommend that you do have Integration Designer 11. You start working on it right away with any new projects that you have, because as time goes on, we're going to develop new products that won't be able to work in both platforms simply based on the technologies involved. So we talked about adding, how that structure was based out in rooms and controllers and sources when all those met. And then we went through the entire configuration of the system and all the different devices. And I know I skimmed through a few things, but at the same time, keep in mind that we do have quite a robust training curriculum for you available on RTI Excel that does go into depth on each one of those specific tabs that are available in the types of system and devices, as well as things like, for example, Zigbee and understanding what Zigbee is. There's full training materials on that, and getting into the technologies revolving around it and ensuring a solid communication. So that's kind of what we did yesterday. In terms of today, what we want to do is we want to understand what our activities in the system and macros are, and what System Manager does, and how it plays into this creation of a project, and on all projects of Integration Designer, and why we put something in that. And the importance of the System Manager that will allow you to actually create projects in a much faster methodology, and actually create a much more seamless experience for your client time and time again. We'll also talk about the auto programming and understanding how that's done through what's called tags. And I'm going to lean on Vincent a little bit in terms of the tags and anything he wants to interject about System Manager as well. Two brains are better than one. We both have quite a history with Integration Designer 11, and we want to make sure that we get you all the necessary details. So, with the objectives that we have laid out here, this is, as I mentioned, we're going through the single room programming. We're talking about the single room areas in this area and building out a project, but keeping in mind that the client may have aspirations for doing something in the future on a larger scale, complex. So something about distributed audio, and we kind of keep mentioning things that would play into it, or the control aspect on it, and why we would place certain devices, certain sources, or even controllers into certain locations based on that. So really, before I jump into, or I don't want to jump into resources, I'm going to jump right to programming here. So let's open up the programming side of things. 1 second here. I just want to flip over my screen. All right. One thing that I wanted to notate, I apologize. It looks like there were a couple of questions that came in here. Question about adding sources. So I added 2 LG IP drivers for 2 TV sets. Oh, looks like it's getting answered. Okay. Looks like Vincent's answering that one. So we'll continue on here.
Let's answer this live, because this might be something we need to show. Okay. So he's saying he added 2 LG IP drivers. Can you go to the workspace and let's follow him along? So you go to the driver section, you look for the LG IP, and now some drivers are going to give you the ability to add multiple instances of it, meaning you'll be able to add up to a certain amount of TV sets in this case, to the system without having to add additional drivers. Now, some other drivers, like this one, you'll have to add a separate instance of the driver for every set. So some have that capability, some don't. So you were right in that when you add an LG IPTV, when you go to add the next one, you're actually adding another driver, not another instance, as we call it, of the same driver.
Right. So if I were to go in and type Roku as a good example, you'll see that it says add to existing driver, meaning that this driver has the capability of having multiple players control it at the same,
So we already,
from one instance of it. Whereas, as he was mentioning, the LG driver is a single instance driver. So every TV that's an LG IP controlled TV would need that driver listed in it. And they would be listed under the driver section individually, whereas the Roku would be listed once, but then said players would be in said rooms.
yeah, like when we added the Yamaha, could you just go to the Yamaha real quick? When we added the Yamaha AVR, you see on top where it says add to existing driver. If you open that up and you open up zone, you can see we already allocated zone 1. So it's not going to show up here. So now we would place zone 2 in if we're using zone 2, zone 3 if we're using zone 3, and zone 4. However, if you're not using those zones and you're using a separate receiver in another room, then you would add another driver and you'd have 4 other zones to add for that driver. So it takes a little getting used to, but it's really efficient because it uses a lot less resources by using the same driver, in this case, to control multiple zones, and in the Roku's case, to control multiple players.
Right, exactly. And the next comment was, but they are listed under the same name. So I get 2 LG IP drivers without the addition of the room name. Well, but again, keep in mind that you're still going to select that room in which that device lies. So even though the driver would be listed under the driver section under global, the actual source for this would be in whichever room you select it from the room list here.
I think I get what he's saying. Here's a power tip. I know what you're saying. You're saying that the drivers aren't named properly. What I like to do is I like to rename my drivers. So if I have multiple TVs, instead of seeing LG IP1 and LG IP number 2, I'll go in and rename them as I add them. So it'll say LG TV living room or LG TV media room. So this way, you know, of course you can name the source custom, but you could also name the drivers custom by right-clicking under the drivers tab and renaming any driver you want. Just click rename and you could call that whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't get too elaborate, but you know what I mean? Like, so you could like go to the Yamaha Avantage. If you only have one zone for this driver, in this case, you could just say Yamaha or AVR family room if you're not concerned about the name of the actual driver. So, or media room, yes. So you can rename these drivers. You might have to do it as you go, which is kind of tough, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Hopefully that answered your question. Good question.
Very good question. And also I want to point out that you may have noticed that when I initially had opened this up, it looked something like this in the workspace. This is a very cool feature about Integration Designer 11 is the fact that we can open up this tree on what's necessary. So if you're working on a really large scale project with a lot of different devices in it, and you have, say, 30 rooms, well, to have all of that listed here, that's going to, you know, have to go up and down looking for things. It's nice to be able to just collapse what's not needed in there and then open up what is based on where you're working in here. Or you can always expand them all or collapse them all here. All right, so let me turn off my camera here so I'm not so distracted. I know my striking good looks distract everybody here, but let's let's move on to here. So what we did yesterday in terms of adding the processor and all the drivers and the sources, and remember, a source is going to be any sort of area that we need to have functionality or control or an activity in this sense. And that can be anything from a page like a home page or a please wait to an IR controlled device to an IP controlled device. It all plays into it. It's all based on that source. But after we've added these, all the necessary equipment for that single room, we now need to go and we need to say to ourselves, okay, what does the client want to do in that room? And that's where the activities come into play. So what you would do next in this case, after adding everything in, is go to the media room itself, the room it says media, and then click on that and you'll see it pops up in our workspace area with the name activities under room configuration. If you click on activities, these are what we are going to be working with in terms of developing what the client wants to do in that specific room. Now notice I just brought my button properties window up. You can reshape these as we mentioned before, make them bigger, smaller, taller, shorter, fatter, wider, whatever you want. But I want to bring this up because we don't have so many activities where we can't see everything, but I want to be able to easily show you all the different functionality in here. Once we've clicked on the activities under the room configuration of the media room, you'll see that there are 5 different columns here labeled enable, source type, room, source, and activity name. So enable is going to be checkmarked or uncheckmarked based on if we need to use it as an activity. The best way to think about this is, what is the client going to want to do in that room, right? What equipment do we have that they want to use and how are they going to use it? What would be the title phrase for it, right? So for example, if we go to this list and we see, this is enabled, we've got the Roku, which is enabled, great. The weather, which is enabled. Okay, they may want to check the weather. They may want to use the Roku. They may want to stream some music. They may want to use the media player as well. But I also have that the TV is also enabled here. Well, we think to ourselves, when we're developing the profile, are they going to be using the TV to watch TV with? Well, yes, but are they going to be using it as the actual source of the content? In other words, are they going to be having, using an antenna into it, or is it a smart TV? If the answer is no to either one of those, and it's basically just the display, then you don't need it as an actual activity because we're going to incorporate the commands and functionality of that device into the watching of Roku or the watching of a Blu-ray. So in this case, I would disable that TV in the media room because it's not necessarily an activity I need, but I still have access to all of the commands necessary to get it on. In terms of a home page, is this something the client might want to do? Would they maybe want to go to the home page? Well, in this case, yeah. You know what? I'm going to enable that. And you'll notice as soon as I enabled home for under global, it goes right to the top, or excuse me, right. It enables and it goes to the bottom of the list of all those that are enabled. How about please wait? Well, that's not necessarily activity, but I'm still going to use it, but I don't need an activity for that. Another homepage just for this one. Well, the global covers both aspects, so I don't need that in that one. That's just kind of an extra homepage. And then the AVR. Well, again, the AVR is the audio source for it, but are we using any additional functionality to it? In this case, no, we don't. So we're not going to check mark that. So these are going to be our activities that are going to be listed under the activities list on the page. So when the client says, I want to do this, there'll be a button that they can either press, or in the list, it will be an option for them to select and go and have the macro execute and the proper commands and initiate what the client wants to do, the activity. The room is where the source actually resides. The source itself is named here, so you know exactly what it is. Bless you. But then we have activity name as well. Now, activity name in the list menus that we talked about, and when the client is going to see that on the homepage of their T2X or on the iPad that they're going to be using and they want to select it, this is what they will see, the name that you put in here. So it's advisable not to put something in here that might be detrimental to your business, like instead of weather, stick your head out the door, dummy. No, you probably don't want to put something like that out there, but you might want to change this to what's the activity? What does the client want to do? In this case, they want to check weather. How about Roku Media Room? Well, just having Roku Media Room isn't a great activity name, so maybe it's something along the lines of watch Roku. How about RTI streaming music? Well, maybe not that. Maybe listen to music, because that's the music source. Blu-ray. Well, in this case, maybe watch Blu-ray. Home. Well, we can leave that as home. Maybe that's go home, or they touch it and it goes back to the home page, right? So keep in mind that the name that you place here is what the client will actually see in that list menu of the activities. Okay. Now, this is also the order in which they will do things, or for which it will be displayed. So it's important to take a look at this and say to yourself, does this order make sense for my client for the functionality of it? A good rule of thumb, in my opinion, is you put the most used ones on top, and then you group them based on the type that you're using. So, for example, the home activity, I'm probably going to put that at the top because, that's generally a button that's pressed almost all the time, right? So maybe the home activity is going to be the first one on the list. Check weather. Well, they're not going to do that very often, so maybe I'll move that down to the bottom. And I select it, press the move down button, and it goes to the bottom of the enabled sources. Now I've got watch Roku, listen to music, and watch Blu-ray. Well, what you'll notice here is that these are listed as both video, audio, and video. So I want to group these together. Now, let's backtrack here. What does video, audio, and other mean? Well, within System Manager, we've divided up the activities into these three base types. Video and audio are the most commonly used ones that are specific to most room applications. So they are tied together, but they are not dependent on each other. Audio allows us to have a different set of commands placed in it for that specific source. For video and audio, although utilizing a majority of the same type of commands, we'll actually have a different set for the audio portion. So I'll explain that as we go through here in a minute. But the others are going to be those generic based ones, those types of activities that you want to be able to control a few different things, but it's not specific. For example, going to the home page on a device, well, that's just going to go to, that's just another. There's not a page on there, right? It will go to the home page when we create it, but in this case, there's not a specific source type. Even if I click this ellipsis, it gives us the ability to set the source type to one of these three. Or for example, other. Well, with weather, same type of scenario where we're going to go check the weather, but we're probably not going to deselect or not watch any more. We don't want it to turn off the Roku, or we don't want it to stop the music playing. We just want to go to the weather, check it, and then go back to the listen to music. And that's where System Manager really shines, is the ability for it to monitor those things so that if you do switch a specific source or source type, it knows what to turn on, what to turn off, and what not to turn off, and what not to turn on as it's going through the progression of these types. Another one that's a little more relevant, if you're doing lighting control, well, that's going to be in other, because what you're generally going to be doing is not initiating a specific macro. It's just going to go to that lighting page where you can control those lights, or a thermostat, or even a security camera. You can still initiate all those different types of commands, or even do additional macros based on a System Manager switch to a different type, but that's pretty advanced stuff that we're not going to get into today. So just keep in mind that you've got other video and audio. You want to make sure that they're in the order and named for what the client is going to be doing that activity. What do they want to do? And then put them in here. Now, as we start to build these activities, let's begin with the first one. And I mentioned that under the activity name home, it's listed as a source type as other. Well, you'll notice under the button and properties here, it says events, selection events, and deselection events. Selection events are what will happen when the client initiates or presses the button for that activity to begin, right? And underneath that selection event will be a list of the different options available for that source type selection event. You've got activity selected and activity ready. Deselection are what's going to happen when you deselect that specific source. So if I go from home to check weather, what is the process? What is going to happen when they do that? Okay, now in this case, you'll notice that under the activity for home, you'll see that there's activity selected, which generally is going to be a lot of routing of signals and once this is selected, what do you want me to do type of scenario. But for this, it's just a quick page jump. So in the case of the home, if I go to activity ready, which is the last step, you'll see that the page links have already been populated here to go to the home page. So the client goes to their activity list, they press home, it immediately will go to the home page of the calling controller. Now, what's a calling controller? A calling controller is the controller that is initiating this selection event. So if you're using your T2X and you press home, that is the calling controller. If you're using an iPad, that is the calling controller. It won't affect all of them unless you really want to. And where that might come in handy, maybe in applications like commercial-based applications where you've got a few different control panels and you want them all to be doing the same type of thing or have the same functionality on them, you might initiate a page link to all the controllers in that case. But for our example here, we'll just leave it as calling controller. So calling controller will be the T2X or the iPad, whichever one presses the home activity. It won't change the page on the other one unless you select all controllers. And even at that note, it won't select for devices like an iPad or even devices that are dependent on Wi-Fi signal. Those have to be on and functional for that all controllers to actually happen. It's not going to retain it and then switch it once they come on. If that were the case, you might have a whole bunch of you turn on your iPad, and all of a sudden you've got a page flip because it's been stored up. That's not what we want to have happen. So just keep that in mind, that that device has to be on and in communication with the processor for the page flip to happen under the all controllers. Okay, so that's a base idea on a global one. And you'll see that with the weather, it's the same functionality here. A page link, global home for the calling controller. Pretty straightforward. Now, if we go to the Watch Roku, you'll notice that our selection events here have increased quite a bit. We've got quite a few options here under the activity for watching Roku, as well as our deselection events. We've got activity start, room on, video on, power on the source, activity selected, and activity ready. Now think of this as taking a big old macro, a full on, you're looking at the whole thing and it's breaking it up. And the reason we're breaking it up is because System Manager is able to monitor each area of this and know what is currently happening in the system so that if I do change something, it's not going to turn off the TV and then turn it back on in the case of watching Roku to listen to going to watch Blu-ray. Oh, I did neglect. I meant to group these together. I apologize. I'm going to hit watch Blu-ray and I'm going to move that up to under watch Roku. There we go. So now I've got my video options together, my audio options together. Okay, sorry, little OCD peeve there. So there's our watch Roku. So we've got our selection events. This is what is going to happen when the client presses the watch Roku activity on their device. So what happens first? Well, the activity begins. What we've done here is we've actually created this little balloon helper at the bottom to give you an idea of what is typically put into this type of area. What type of macro steps are needed in this area, or what is the general flow of functionality? In this case, with activity start, you'll notice that it says this macro is run whenever the activity is selected, but before any changes are made. You can use it to send the controller to a please wait page. The macro is common to all activities in the room, meaning that activity start will, once I place the page link in here or whatever I want in here, all the other activities in this room, in the media room that have activity start in there will have this macro, which makes the programming much, much faster for you. So we talked about the please wait page, which we added in as a global source. We need to get it into this macro step. So if I navigate over to my right-hand window here that's labeled as tags right now and click on macro steps, you'll see all the different macro steps or macro steps that I can place into that area. Everything from, selecting a specific activity, doing variable tests, putting a comment in, trigger control and relays, page links, stopping macros, time delays, and commands. Well, in this case, we need it to go to the please wait page, because what we want to do is when the client selects this, we want that visual reassurance to them that the process is happening so they don't press a bunch of buttons. So let's place a please wait page link in here. I can either double click on this or click and drag. If I double click, it places it in. If I click and drag, it also places it in. Either way, I've got two in, I don't need both. So I'm going to just delete the one. You can either delete the whole macro or delete all the macro steps in here, or just delete one wherever the cursor is that you see here by pressing the delete selected. There's my page link. I'm going to select my device. The device being that it's going to be the global please wait page, and I want it to be my calling controller. This is very similar to that activity ready that we saw before, where the page link was for the weather to go to the weather page or the home page on the calling controller. Same type of thing for the activity start. Let's move on to the next step. So after the page link happens in the macro step, so we got the please wait page coming up. What do we need to happen next? Well, we need to turn the room on. So what does the room on mean? Room on is typically going to be those devices that are common to all the activities that are happening within that single room. For example, we talked about the Yamaha AVR being the primary audio source for all the watching of movies, all the watching of Roku, listening to music. It's going to be the common thread amongst all of the sources in here in this case. So in a room on macro for this room, it would be wise for me to put on that command to power on the Yamaha AVR right here, because I'm going to need it for both the video and audio source types, events and activities that we'll be doing. So I'm going to put room on, and I'm going to put a command in. You can double click on the command. We'll select the device. There's our Yamaha that we named media room, the function, main power, and the power discrete code on. So now it's going to send that code directly as the process is happening to that Yamaha AVR. Fantastic. All right, so now we move to video on. Now, video on is going to be common for all the video source types selected activities in this room. In other words, this is common to both the Roku and the Watch Blu-ray for the media room. But it's not going to be common to the listen to music because that's a different source type. So this is typically going to be used for, say, powering on the display in this case, in this scenario, because for both of those, I need the display on. I've already got the receiver on. Now I need the display powering on. So once again, I'm going to add in a command. Now you could also add a command in from this little toolbar button right here, add new macro step, and select the macro type, command, similar as what's over here. The device, we're going to turn on that Samsung TV. Keep in mind that if I press the plus, and then the function being, I've got a whole bunch of IR commands in here. Here's a little tip for you. If you hit the first letter of the command you're looking for, it'll pull the whole list down to that first letter of the first command in there. So if I hit P as an example, it goes to pause. But then I can quickly go down the list and find power on. There we go. I hit enter, boom, there it is. Media room, power on. And you'll notice the function name is there. There's repeats. The delay for 0.3 seconds after the command is using the default, which is that yes that we optioned in for. So now we've got the TV power on. All right. Now let's keep in mind that we're looking at this, and these are just the commands. So it's sending the command, the receiver's power on, the TV's power on. Do we need to power on the source? Well, we might need to power on that Roku, depending on if it's what device it is. So I'm going to hit the command button again, and I'm going to power on the Roku. Select the function. Now, this is where knowing what these, reading the driver information comes in handy, because you'll notice that there's not exactly something that says power in here. I know from experience that it's under keys, but you may not know that. So please keep in mind that you'll want to read the driver info for the details on that. I find the power under the keys section. There's my power on, and there's my Roku on. If I had more than one, I could select whichever one I'm looking for. So there's my Roku power on. All right. So basically, we've turned everything on so far. Now we get to the activity selected start here, or selection event here. And what happens here? Well, keep in mind that these are going to be common. The activity start, the room on, and the video on are common to the room activities for this area, right? But power on source is specific to that specific activity for this activity. So we're just powering on that device. So this is specific, as is activity selected. So what happens in activity selected? Well, this is really where you need to do some analyzing of things. You need to know what inputs are connected to what so that you can take care of the AV routing. You also need to know timing. How long does something take to turn on before I can send it another command? And do I need to add additional steps into this? Do I need to delay it? Do I need to, when do I need to put those in, and how do I need that to function? Basically, what we're doing is we're drawing out this macro sequence. We've gotten to a point now where we're going, okay, we've sent this. How long does the TV need to turn on, before it turns on and changes, before I can change the input to the proper input, or even the receiver in that case. So let's hypothetically say that we've timed it out and we need to add in the commands and the time delay. So let's add in 2 commands. And I'm just going to double click on the commands twice and then add in a time delay. You may say, well, I need that time delay to be X amount of time. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's go ahead and get the routing done. So first and foremost, I need the receiver to go to what? Well, it's going to go to the input. I'm going to hit the letter I for inputs, and it brings me down to the list. And I'm going to find maybe HDMI 1 as an example, because I've got the Roku plugged into HDMI 1 on the receiver. Now, I want to make sure that the TV, the Samsung TV that we're going to use, is on HDMI 1 as well. So I select the device, the Samsung TV in the media room. I find the function for it. In this case, I might just hit I for input and see if it's in there. There's HDMI 1, perfect. So I've got the HDMI going out from the Yamaha into HDMI 1 on the TV. And then I look at my time delay and I say, okay, well, we've got the command for room on is an IP command. So it's sending it right away. Great. Okay. Video on the Samsung TV, it sends that IR code, then it waits 0.3 seconds, and then it sends the IP command to the Roku to turn on, which might take another, let's just say another second or so, right? So is that enough time for those 2 devices, the Yamaha and the Samsung, to power on fully before we can change the inputs? Well, you're going to need to do a little test on that. You're going to need to determine that yourself. I have no magic answer to say, well, it's 4 seconds and that's how much time it takes. So you're going to have to do a little bit of math on that, but we give you the option to put in as much time as you need in terms of seconds for this area. So if we just needed 4 additional seconds to happen before these happen, then I could put 4 seconds in. Then I left click on it, hold that command and drag it to the top and place it there. So now it powers on those 2 devices, the TV, or the receiver, the TV, the Roku, everything's turning on. It waits an additional 4 seconds. Then it initiates the HDMI switching and input changes on the proper devices. And again, I have no magic number on this. You're going to have to determine that based on the devices you're using. Okay, the final step, once everything's turned on and it's ready to be functional and used for the client, we want it to go to the Roku Media Room page, which is already in there for us. Integration Designer is taking care of that. So our selection event, once again, is when the client presses this activity. This is the sequence of macro steps that is going to happen in that time frame. All right, so what about deselection events? Well, deselection events are the inverse of this. The room off start. Well, what do we want to have happen there? We want it to go back to the please wait page. They're turning it off or they're changing it. We want it to go to please wait so that they know the process is happening. So let's add a page link in. And we'll add the please wait for the calling controller. Activity deselected. Well, we don't necessarily need anything in this area. I mean, you could put an additional command in if you so desired, but in this case, if the activity is deselected, like going from Roku to Blu-ray, could we put a command into pause whatever we're watching so that we come back to it? So for example, if they go from, they want to see whatever movies on Blu-ray and then come back to the Roku, could they put the pause in? Sure. But in this case, we'll leave it blank. Powering off the source. Well, we would need to power off the Roku. So we add the command in. We find the Roku driver. We find the keys in this case and the power off for the Roku. Video off. Well, again, that's the inverse of video on, which was the Samsung TV being turned off or turned on. So we want to turn off the TV. We add our command in, Samsung TV, power with the letter P, press P and goes right to power and power it off. And then the room off, meaning they're not going to switch between these different activities. They're not going from watch Roku to listen to music. They're basically shutting down the entire room. Well, the room off, the last thing, the inverse of the Yamaha receiver turning on is turning it off. So we add the command in, we put the Yamaha in, and we find our main power and power it off. And then the room off complete goes to the page link for the calling controllers with a menu of showing of having the menu show the activities that are available for that room. Okay. So really what we've done here is we've created this whole macro sequence for selecting an activity and deselecting that activity. And the cool part about this is that Integration Designer System Manager is going to monitor this as it goes through. So let's go to another activity very similar to the Watch Roku, but the Watch Blu-ray. And you may say, oh man, you got to go through all of that again, step by step. Well, the cool part about Integration Designer 11 is that if we go to Watch Blu-ray now, you'll notice that these ones are already shaded with a purple hue to them, meaning that because they were common to the room and even the source type, they've already been set up. There's our activity start. It's already done. Our room on is already done. Our video on is already done for us. Now we just need to turn on the Blu-ray player. So we'll add our command, select our Blu-ray player, power command, power on, and now we're powering on our Blu-ray player. And then the activity selected. Well, you remember that was like a three-step process, and the activity selected could actually entail a lot more. You could have lights dim to a certain level. You could have you could adjust the temperature in a room. You could turn on, the ambient lights. You could flip on a sign that says room occupied. I mean, whatever you want to put, but that could actually be a pretty extensive list of macro steps. Here's a little hint for you, something that'll save you a lot of time. Let's go back up to Watch Roku and select our activity selected. If I click in this area to get my cursor blinking, as you can see here, if I hold the shift button down and click on copy, it's going to copy these commands. I can then go to Watch Blu-ray, select activity selected, and paste them in. And then all I need to do is just change the input, say on the Yamaha to HDMI 2, because that's where the Blu-ray player is plugged in. The timing shouldn't change all that much, but now I've just saved myself a whole bunch of clicking and dragging and dropping over and adjusting and finding and all that kind of stuff by simple copy and paste. So again, if you go to a certain area, you want to copy those commands in the macro, make sure that there's a cursor in here by clicking anywhere that's not a macro or on one of the macros themselves. Holding the shift key, you can copy it and then paste it when you get to the next area. Or if you want just a specific command, you can just click without holding shift, the copy button, and then paste it where it needs to go. So in this case now, we have our activity selected done with our HDMI 2. Our TV is going to stay on HDMI 1, which is great. The activity ready is going to the Blu-ray page. We're in good shape. Same thing for room on, the deselection events. Well, there's our please wait for the calling controller. We don't need anything for deselected. Powering off the source. Well, I could just go to power on source, copy this, power off, paste it in, and then select power off. I'm feeling a little lazy on that one. And then our video off and our room off with the receiver turning off and the room off complete. So think of how much time we spent going through and doing the Roku and how little time we spent doing this for the Blu-ray. All right, so let's switch gears here a little bit now. We're going to go to a different source type, which is going to be listen to music. Now in listen to music, because it's an audio source type, you'll now see that this all remains relatively similar except for audio on. So what's the difference then between video on and audio on? Well, again, audio on might be for those situations where you're turning on a specific, amplifier, or if you're doing like a 2-channel system and you need to turn on that amp, and use that in that function. Or you've got another device that you want to use as the source for that audio output. That's where that audio on comes into play. But you'll see room on is already there for us because again, this is common to the room and the video and audio source types in that room. Audio on, we don't necessarily need anything because everything's going through the Yamaha AVR. And then on the power on source, well, the cool part about RTI Music and the MS1 is that it's PoE powered. So I don't even need to turn it on. It's always on. It's ready to rock. So now I just need to go to my activity selected and change the inputs. Well, in this case, I really don't need a lot of extras in here because it's going to power on. I just need to change the input on the Yamaha to that specific input. So I'm not going to even do a copy and paste. I'm just going to add that command in, maybe do the Yamaha Avitage and find the input. So main input here. And we'll just do, why don't we do just audio 1 for what, actually, you know what? We'll do digital on this one. Where's my digital? No, we can't do optical. I will just do audio 1. That's fine. So now we've got our Yamaha powering on. We might need a little bit of time from when the Yamaha turns on to when it switches the input. Again, I don't know 100%, but if I were to put the time delay in, again, it's not going to hurt anything. So there's our time delay. It changes the input. The activity goes to the RTI streaming music page, and we're done with this one. Room off start for this deselection event goes to please wait. Deselected, I don't necessarily need anything in here. Could I put in maybe a pause command on the music? Sure, let's do that for fun. So I'm going to go to my command. Let's go to RTI music. I'm going to just have the command for pause, the transport command to go to pause for my MS1 player. And I'm just going to pause it. So now if I'm listening to music and I'm going to go check a sports score real quick and I deselect the event, it's going to pause the MS1. And then when I come back and it goes to that page, I can just press play again and we're rocking and rolling with it. Powering off the source, well, I don't need to do that because it's always on, always ready. Audio off, again, we didn't have audio on, so nothing there. Room off, well, we're turning off the receiver, so we're in good shape. And the complete, deselection event is turning off going to the home page and changing the menu to activities on the calling controller. So really, when you're looking at this, it's a pretty straightforward approach. Again, just to reiterate, there's a question that came in, activity selected, he changed to input 2. Yeah, I just changed the HDMI input on the activity selected after we copied and pasted it to HDMI 2 from HDMI 1. I left the TV as HDMI 1 because the output from the Yamaha is going directly into HDMI 1, and I don't need to change anything there. And then once again, check weather. You see that the activity ready is there. It's just going to the weather page. It's not changing anything. We're in good shape. So what we've done here is we've created activities, but we've also built System Manager, because the cool thing about System Manager is that it's going to monitor these once again. So if I'm watching a movie as an example, and I say, oh, I want to check this, the hockey scores, and I press watch Roku, well, what will happen is that it will go through the deselection event of going to please wait. It'll power off the source, and it'll go to the video off, but it won't go to the video off. What it will actually do is it won't execute that because it knows that because I'm changing the activity to watch Roku and that it's utilizing the room on and the video on, it doesn't need to initiate those. It knows that those are already on, so it doesn't need to go through those deselection events. And in fact, because we're going to that, it's not going to go to the home page either on the Blu-ray. It's going to immediately go right to the Roku homepage because we watch Roku. It's going to bypass this. It's going to bypass this. It's going to bypass this. It's going to turn on the Roku, and it's going to change the signal routing and go to the Roku page. But it will monitor all those so that you don't have to utilize that with internal logic or anything of that nature. So System Manager is very powerful on that front, and being able to speed up the macro sequence so that a lot of extra commands aren't necessary in there. All right, so I hope that gives you a good grasp about what the activities are and what the selection events are, and if where those things can be. Now, is it absolutely 100% all the time that you need to put, say, the video on in the video on, like power on the TV into the video on? No, absolutely not. You need to determine what's going to be best for the sequence for your client. If you want that to always be initiated, you can put it on in the power on the source. Or if you always want it on, no matter what, you could put it in the room on. Right. So it kind of depends on where you want to do it. In, say, commercial applications, for example, I probably wouldn't have the video on for this activity for the media, for a media room. I'd probably, if there's video distribution involved, I probably would put it in the room on, because when you turn the room on in, say, a sports bar, for example, you got a bunch of TVs, well, you want them all on all the time. And even if there's music going, you want those TVs to stay on. So we probably would put it in the power on sequence rather than the video on sequence, to avoid the deselection event of it turning off if I change it to listen to music. So again, you're going to need to kind of map out what the client's looking for and what the process of the macro should be and placement. Because again, it's not rock solid. I'm not saying this is cut in stone that you need to always put it here. These are just the general majority of the time type of use cases that these types of commands would go into these places. All right, a good question that came up. You don't actually do anything in System Manager, it just runs in the background. Right. So yeah, and please put any questions that you do have in the question and answer section of the software. That way we can monitor it. Yeah, System Manager is like the added bonus, right? It's the thing that we are doing in the background for you, so that as it's progressing through the macros and the commands, it knows, okay, don't do this because it's already done. We're going to use that again anyway, and just speeds up the process quite a bit. And in fact, you can even, as you progress through your training and working with Integration Designer 11, there's ways that you can call and check on different system manager and activities that have been utilized as variables to do tests with, so that if you have a crazy situation where you needed to see if the room on for Watch Roku is currently on, right? You could do a test on that to see if that activity's happened or not. So it offers an opportunity for you to really gain a lot more of an automation functionality to it and command functionality of the overall project.
Hey,
All right.
Tyler.
So the other thing that I want to point out to everybody here is that so far in the programming, and we're about we're about a session and a half into this, we have yet to go to the user interface at all. We haven't touched the user interface at all. All we've been doing so far is adding the devices and creating the activities. And that's the right way to do this. Previous versions of Integration Designer, we would have been in the user interface already, dragging and dropping every single command onto every single button repeatedly. In this case, we've gone in and created the activities, we've created the sources, and we've even added pages in that have been needed without actually having to go to each individual device in the project. So what I'm going to do now is I want to show you kind of what we've been doing what Integration Designer has been doing in the background. So if I click on the T2X as an example, and I'm going to bring my button properties down just a hair here, you'll see that in the T2X, if you remember, we talked about the properties of the T2X already and how we wanted to, configure those before we went through anything else. Well, now under the T2X, we've got all of these pages. These pages have all been created for us, and a majority of it's been programmed for us. For example, if I go to the home page, you'll see that the home page is programmed for us utilizing, let me blow this up a little bit for us here, so you can see it, using the Coral template, all set, ready to go. And you'll notice that there are some check marks. These have already been programmed with specific commands. For example, if I click on the volume down command, the command has been programmed on that button for the Yamaha Avatage. Let's go to, say, something like the Roku page. That's done for us. All these commands are already done. Play is done for us. Back is done for us. Reverse, excuse me. Even things like go to the Roku home page or go to Netflix on that page, on the device itself, has been done for us. How about the DVD page? We look at this, look at all those commands that have been done for us. They're all programmed in for us. So Integration Designer has taken a majority of the work for us already. Here's that please wait page that we added in. Here's that weather page that was added in for us, currently in Minneapolis. And it's going to pull this data from the configuration that we put on the driver and pull it in and place it here for us. It's already done. Even the RTI music, where we've got things like metadata for the song type, or play, pause, or likes and dislikes, or even favorites, where we can create favorites names and create our own. The client can create their own and add them into the mix as they progress. This has all been created for us already. Let's go to the iPad. That's a pretty big, pretty large scale operation here, right? Because it's global. Well, let's look at the global page here. Now we look at something like this, we go, whoa, I can't see that very well. Here's a little tip for you. When you're using things that have the rotation, like landscape and portrait, hit Control Q on your keyboard and it will flip. So CTRL plus the letter Q, and it will auto rotate that device between landscape and portrait so that you can see it in both fashions. Remember what I said, if you have the property set up in the orientation to have auto rotation enabled, you're going to want to check the user interface in both fashions, in both landscape and portrait. Because if I move this one as an example up, and I just move the background up real quick, and I hit Control Q, it doesn't affect this one, but it did affect this one. So I would need to make the adjustment in both fashions if necessary. Okay, so you see that this area is done. The weather page is done with all of the different commands. Here's what I was talking about with that list, where the client is going to see not only the room name, because this is a global, they would see all the names of the rooms, like media room in here, or if they added additional rooms down the line, they can choose whichever room and then be able to have the full control of the activities in that room. And those would be listed here as well. RTI music, check this out. Look at all these pages. Here's something really cool for you. What you'll notice, I'm going to deselect, or I'm going to take away visibility from these layers. And to do that, I just click the eyeball here to deselect that. But we'll get into layers a little bit tomorrow. But what I want to show you here is that all of this keyboard layout would take a long time to be able to program one by one and design, and then drag and drop all the commands onto it. We've done it for you. So you don't need to use it. And in fact, if you wanted to use this keyboard time and time again for other areas, for other devices, you certainly could. You wouldn't have to use the RTI or the RTI music commands on there. And like I said, check it out. All the commands are done. Please wait page, the Roku page, the DVD page. Now, what I want to talk about real quick is we look at something like this page here, the Blu-ray page. And we see that most of this has been programmed for us already. That's where the auto programming and system manager kind of kicks into place, is that, you don't, where the auto programming takes place, because we've known that these buttons are going to utilize the same type of the commands from the source, the Blu-ray source, IR codes, as the button is. So how do we do that? Vincent, do you want to chime in about what tags are and how they work?
Absolutely. I don't know if there's a lot of guys here that used to do ID9 or still do ID9, but one of our big dilemmas was that, you would have to constantly drag and drop and program. So what we've created is almost like a language, except it's very easy to learn. It's probably the easiest language to learn, called tags. Tags are labels that are given to buttons and feedback for the purpose of programming macros and feedback. So for example, we have set templates for all these devices. We have Blu-ray templates. We have media manager templates like Roku's. We have Apple TV templates. We have music server templates. And what we do is we pre-tag these templates in advance so that when it goes through the process of adding the user interface, it cross-references the tags to a database of the IR codes or the driver commands, and it populates based on the tag name. The good news is these tag names are logical. Click on the play button. The play button has a tag, if you look at the tag window, called play. So these are very logical names. And ID 11 has standard tags. So let's say we change that tag to something called power. All tags are capitalized, at least the first letter. So if you hit enter, it'll automatically populate that with a power toggle. So if you enter, as long as you enter in a standard tag, it will populate that button based on a cross-reference process with the driver or the IR database. Now, programming is not the only function of tags. It also makes maintenance really easy. For example, if I want to add a command to that play button, maybe I want to send a command from the Blu-ray library. Can we send an arbitrary command from the Blu-ray? It doesn't matter what it is. I just want to prove a point. Maybe every time we press play, we want to send an audio command. Let's pretend that's a valid function. But we have other remotes that are controlling this Blu-ray. Let's go now to the T2X Blu-ray interface that's controlling the same exact Blu-ray and click on that Blu-ray and click on the play command. Because of tags and something we have called macro levels, that functionality will now repopulate on all the remotes controlling that specific device, if we so choose. We're going to get into how this all works and how you could use this for your advantage, but there are some great functions that you're going to realize from tags. Auto programming is one, programming maintenance is another, and the third, which we're going to learn later on, are some of the special functionalities in the software, like the ability to select a room and certain macros changing based on what room is selected, like the volume commands. So we'll show you how tags can really save your butt, so to speak, and make life 100% easier for the small investment in learning how they work.
Fantastic. Couldn't have said it better myself. And like you said, you remove that, we can go to the iPad and there it is, it's been changed. But what if, Vincent, what if we've got something like this that says system menu and there's not a command that lines up with it? Could we still use that tag, or would it be advisable for us to use something different?
Well, what happens when you erase a tag, you're not really removing the relationship between the tag name and the command. There's other ways to delete tags forever. We'll get into that later. But if you just erase the tag window, you're not going to cause any harm, even if there's a valid command on it. So let's say we want to make this button do something different because it couldn't find a home for system menu. Maybe we want to make this a Netflix button. So let's type in the standard tag name for Netflix. It's called app:\Netflix. And if there's a command in the IR library, if you hit enter, it'll link up. That's weird. There's no space, I think, between the.
Well, this is a Blu-ray player.
Yeah, it should.
There it
should
is.
be. Yeah, okay, sorry. Is there a colon in there?
Yep.
Yeah, there's no space. So app Netflix will automatically populate that for you. Now, of course, you have to change the name of the button cosmetically, but that's pretty easy. You just go and right-click, edit text, and change the button, even the font if you want. So now we can change that to Netflix. So tags have a relationship. Now let's say we erase that app Netflix tag. Let's erase it. But then we type it in again. Let's just type it in all over again. Just because we erased it doesn't mean that relationship is removed. So you can remove tag, you could erase tags and change these buttons around without removing the relationship. So you could repopulate that on another button simply by tagging it.
Yeah, and the other thing
we have a list of standard tags by device name that we can share with you.
Absolutely. And you'll see on in the right-hand side here, you can filter out the tags by showing all or the variable or the macro itself and show, okay, here's a list of all the different sources that are available here. Have they been tagged on this particular one, right? And you'll see that it's the case here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, though, is that even though we changed it on this one, doesn't mean it automatically populates that tag new name to, say, the T2X. So you'll see that the system is still there under system menu. So you would still need to go app Netflix as an example, put it on there and still change that text name here to Netflix. And again, to change the text, right click, edit text, and you can change the font type, the size of the font, you can bold, italicize it, underline it, all that kind of fun stuff right there, and have it populate.
Now, keep in mind that tags do have like a naming convention type. So some tags have one word in them, some have two words. If there are two words, the second word is always capitalized. For example, could you show a power on tag?
Well, here we can do, say, top menu as an example.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
So there's top menu. This is a great case where even the command name is menu top, but the relationship is still there.
They are case sensitive, so be careful.
Yep.
You get the hang of it after a while. It's not like learning all different language. A lot of these are very self-explanatory. And if you click around the buttons, you'll already learn some of the common tags. Pop-up menu or options. If you click on options, you'll see options, not very hard. And now certain tag names are different than the actual title. For example, if you click on the return button on the iPad, if you go to the iPad real quick, you might see a button called return. However, the tag name is back. So we don't have a return tag. We call that back. So, and it will map to return, but it will also map to IR commands that say back also. So if you use it in a DirecTV code set, for example, the tag back, it will map to the back IR command or driver command. So what I'm saying is tag names can map to multiple command names. It's all a matter of how the engineers programmed it under the engine in ID11.
The other thing to point out is that we place that macro itself and that tag name were under what's called a source level macro. Okay, but let's take a look real quick at the volume. If I click on unlock the volume layer here and click on, say, mute, you'll notice that this is actually a room level macro. Well, if you recall, when we added the Yamaha receiver, we said we want this to be the primary audio source for that room, which means that essentially this has created a punch through for all the pages on the iPad and the T2X for the media room activities that will have this mute or this Yamaha command on it for mute, volume down, volume up, and even the feedback option for the variable here. If I go to, say, the home page and show you the home list, sorry, that's not a good example. Oh, actually it is. And click volume up, you'll see that is once again tagged volume up, but there's the room. So it's populated that in for us. And again, of course, you can always make adjustments to it if necessary. But the point is that with a room level, now you're affecting all the activities within that room, all the devices and activities within that room, whether it's an iPad or if I go to, say, the Roku and look at the volume layer here, you'll see that Yamaha Avitage is the main level, is for the main mute toggle for the media room. And we've directed it as such. So a tag like mute can be very, very useful in this case, but you can do it on a couple of different types. For example, you'll see that there are two macro commands here. One is a source, one is a room. Well, the one that is the lowest to the bottom here is the highest priority. For example, controller is the highest priority. If there was a command in here, that's the one that would be executed. If I created it on the room, and there was one above it, as in this case, like source, then the room macro command would be initiated over and above the Roku, so that there's no cross-referencing on this, no cross-talk on this, for example, on here. So it gives you an idea of what's possible. Now, the other thing I want to show you real quick here is under Roku. If I go to, say, home, the home button here, you'll notice that this isn't a command. It still has a tag. The button still has a tag here. But what we have is now under the tag, a page link. And that page link gives us the ability to assign just a page link to a button if needed. Sometimes you don't need a lot of an activity to go to a specific page, or you just want to flip the device over to a page just to get to another area of it on the user interface. That's where this comes in handy, because you can select everything from the type of page groups that you're looking for in here to a specific page within that group. Whether it's the home list or the power or the first page in that group, you have the options to change those on that page link area within a button. And that's true for both soft buttons, as we could do here, or hard buttons, as we can do here. Keep in mind, they still have a tag. This still has a tag named home. And if we click on this button, right, I didn't mean to unlock it or lock it. Click on the home, you'll notice that it is tagged as home also, and a page link. Same thing. Home, page link, same thing. All right. So again, what we've kind of done here is we've created, for those of you that are, older RTI guys, you've essentially, with the activities, created your system macros that you've done forever in these activities here, and you're accessing them, and you still have full accessibility, as you saw from the iPad, to get to those specific pages or command those, because the iPad itself on the homepage will have a listing of all of the different activities, or the source list activities right here based on the room you select, and be able to have full capability of accessing them and using them. So we make it very easy for you to utilize time and time again. Again, keep in mind with activities that it's either going to be a video, an audio, or an other. Video and audio are connected, but are not dependent on each other necessarily. Okay, so you'll go through, you'll create the different selection types for the activity on both the selection events and deselection events. You can use copy and paste functionality in here. We talked about how it auto programs all these pages for you that are still fully customizable. And we'll get into a little bit of the customization tomorrow. But just as an example, if I wanted to turn this Netflix red, I could go and turn the Netflix red if I wanted to. Or if I wanted to change the background, I could change the background. But you still have all of the customization capabilities that RTI is so well known for, but in an easy to use template that, again, if you don't want to use, if you like how this looks, but you want to use it for a different type of product, or a different, you're using a different music stream or a video streamer, you could certainly do that. And you could utilize the command and the tags for doing those types of things. So we really have given you a lot of tools, but we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you already, which makes life a heck of a lot easier for you in terms of the overall programming of a project. So with that, I want to go ahead and open it up into any questions that you may have. Please post them in the question and answer section. Vincent, is there anything else that we need to cover regarding tags that you can think of?
Yeah, there's definitely questions. Can you show the tag name for the Amazon app? I think we have that on the road.
Go off again.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot.
Oh,
Can you show the Prime Video standard tag name?
Absolutely.
So it should be app :
Prime space video.
Yeah, so if you enter that, it'll populate. If you enter it any differently, it won't. If you create your own tag name, you could use it on other controllers, but it won't automatically define. For example, there might be an app that we don't have a standard tag for. for example, I don't know, making this up. I don't know if we have a standard tag for crackle, for example. So if you typed in, oh, Jesus, I'm probably gonna have a hard time thinking.
Let's go with church.
Yeah,
Jeez.
just make up something. Oh my God,
No.
really? Jeez.
Oh, but it's
Okay.
launching it by name. The
Yeah. Well, there has to
Anyway.
be a standard tag name. Somebody would
Yeah.
have to have defined that in the software somewhere. Can action in other, for instance, a switch status to on trigger an activity like play music? Now, here's the rule of thumb. If your device has to turn on something and has to switch something, you're going to have to define it as a video or audio device. So if you're going to do something like switch inputs or turn on something like an audio device or a video device, it's got to be an audio or video device. If you're just going to jump to it, that's an other. And there's a reason why we have strict rules on this. System Manager knows when you're actually in an audio activity, a video activity, or in an other type of activity. It also is going to keep track of what macros need to be sent or not sent. So there's a rhyme and a reason. So is there a list of defined app tag names somewhere? Yes, I have a link. I got to find it. We'll try to follow up tomorrow with it. I lost all my bookmarks, unfortunately, because I got a new computer. So I kind of have to dig it up somewhere. So bear with me while I find that. It'll be posted at one point. A cable box would have to be a video, because what if the TV wasn't on? It would have to turn on. What if the receiver wasn't on? It would have to turn on, and it would have to switch to that input of the cable box. So video all the way.
Yep.
So hopefully that answers
an
those
action in
questions.
other, for instance, a switch status switching to on trigger an activity like play music. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in another, again, you still have an activity selected option here where you could put in, something like play this music. Absolutely, you could. You could switch everything on in this. You could turn on the receiver, turn on the, turn on to a certain music and volume level and all that kind of stuff in the activity selected. If somebody presses the home button if they wanted to. So you certainly can do stuff like that. Again, this isn't what I mentioned before. It's not set in stone. The only thing that is kind of rock solid are the common use events like room on, video on, activity start and activity ready. Those are going to be common for those types of activities and the room and the video. But if you've got something kind of obscure or outside the box, that's when you can do the power on the source or even activity selected and add those things into the mix. And in fact, you can create your own. So if we wanted to have a blank page that doesn't have a source at all. So if, let's hypothetically say a client, in the family room has I'm trying to think of one.
Like a game port?
Bluetooth,
Like a game port?
like a game port, yeah, like an HDMI port, where all we're doing is running the game port from the wall into the TV. Well, yeah, we could create a page that is we could add a blank page into the mix, enable it as a source, and then you change that source name to, game port, and then create an activity that has, a video-based activity, change the video-based activity and turn everything on and have it go right to it without actually having a specific device there. All right.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about, a lot of people are asking, are tags on a source level? Are they on a room level? We're going to talk more about macro levels in tomorrow's class, but macro levels allow you to drive the functionality of a tag as high or as low in the interface as you want. For example, if you wanted that play command to do the same thing on every device in a room, you would make it a room macro. If you only wanted to impact that source, you'd make it a source macro, which it already is by default. There's also other macros like global and controller. We'll talk about those, but Global will take a tag name and make sure it does the same thing no matter where it's located, regardless of the controller, regardless of the room, regardless of what source it's on. So things like arm the house. If you're going to tag something, arm the house, and you're going to program functionality to arm the house, and you're going to put buttons all over the interface that do the same thing, they arm the house. But let's say you make a change to it somewhere, it'll sweep that change across the entire interface. That's the beauty of a global level macro. So these macros work in tandem with the tag names. They allow you to drive functionality as far or as close you want in ID 11, which is wonderful because now you can fix problems without messing them up in other places. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Somebody's asking, this is a great question. Are the activities, or probably you meant system manager, is it kind of like creating fake flags? Absolutely, yes. System manager, and let's go through one. Let's go through the Roku one. So if we look at the system manager for the Roku, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to start. It's going to say, okay, someone selected watch Roku. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make sure I jump to a please wait page. That will happen every time, even if you press it twice. It's going to jump to a please wait page. Then it's if the room hasn't been turned on yet. Let's say you've never pressed an audio or video task. It will turn on that Yamaha. Now, if you're coming from, let's say, a Blu-ray or the audio, that order automatically turned on the room already. So it'll bypass this. It tracks already that the room is on. I don't need to send that command. Then it goes to the video command and it says, well, do I need to turn on the TV? If you already turned on the TV with another video activity in this room, it will bypass this one also. Otherwise, it'll turn on the TV. Power on source. If you get to the power on source and that source has already been turned on, excuse me, even in another room, if it's sharing this Roku, excuse me, it will bypass this. However, if you're using Roku for the first time in this room and it's never been turned on in another room, it'll power on the Roku. So you can see how these macros work. Now it comes time to do the switching. That's the activity selected. It needs to select that. It needs to select the activity. So what it does is it switches. That will switch the Yamaha and the TV. If you have a matrix, it'll switch that. So, and then of course, when the activity is ready, it'll jump to that page, but that'll automatically be programmed to you. If you could jump to that to illustrate how that's already programmed for us, activity ready. So you see it's well. Now, the beauty of this is that it doesn't have to, you don't have to program macros for every remote. What if the client had 30 remotes in the media room? You'd only have to do it once. Every remote is using System Manager. In fact, if you're using list menus and not button menus, your work is completely done. You don't even have to set up activities or anything like that. The menu structure has been built. The activities have been embedded in the list menus, and button menus are a little hard, take a little more work, but not much more. Someone's asking if they have an RP4 installed. RP4s will not work with System Manager. You need a two-way processor. This is all two-way, folks. This is the time and day where two-way is really important. So the System Manager uses that built-in processor intelligence that the RP4 simply doesn't have. So you're not going to be able to use system variables or System Manager, two-way feedback, or anything else with RP4s. Someone's asking if they can make a page password. There are drivers for that in the third-party section of the forum that make that real easy.
There's also fun ways to do it, but it takes a lot of time.
You can do it
drivers are much
you
easier.
can do it with flags, but there's cool
flags.
User accounts,
The good old flags one.
things like that.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit here today. So folks, make sure that, as you were following along, make sure to save the process you've done so far. And again, tomorrow when we get going, I'll have this file available for you on the chat area. And please let us know, if you do have any questions. We're happy to help you in any way that we can. But, from Vincent and myself, thank you so much for coming on today and spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Thanks.